Retreat continued. Cliff wasn't sure when he'd stopped looking for joy in everything. He remembered having dreams. He could write poetry too. He hadn't in decades, but still. It was like riding a bike, right? Maybe he'd write Davy a poem. His birthday was coming up in a couple of weeks. He'd been trying to come up with something special for this year. It was Davy's 52nd, and he seemed to be having a hard time with his coming birthday. Or maybe it was Cliff who was having a hard time with it. They'd both been testy and irritable lately, it seemed. Cliff was sure that his own seemingly increasingly longer bad moods hadn't helped. He pulled into the long circular drive in front of the cabin and turned off the car. The Mazda RX-7 was an anomaly in these surroundings, the bright red a flash of artificial color in the mists of muted shades in green and brown. Everything was very organic, with the exception of the car. The Mazda really was an affectation. Davy had tried to talk him into buying something more exotic so they could have matching vroom vrooms. Cliffy's eyes gazed upwards involuntarily. He didn't see the need for anything more exotic than a car manufactured in Japan, so the bright red convertible import was his concession. He wondered briefly what Davy would think of the cabin. He'd never had him up here. Cliff thought his own motives were suspect on this as well. He could just see Davy whooping in delight, dashing, as only he could dash, through the house, exclamations coming in waves as he made his way to the bedroom and private deck. Cliff could clearly see Davy in his mind's eye in that moment. A sharp intake of breath. Davy whirling around, his arms outspread, his eyes dancing with sheer joy and wonder. Cliff was sure it would be very much like that. Of course, Davy would put potted bulbs everywhere. He was actually quite good at putting container gardens together. It was just one of the many gifts Davy had been blessed with. He'd probably also want to have a large BBB gatherings with the local LGBTQ community, if there were any. Davy would find them for sure. And Tibetan peace flags would be flying from the eaves. Cliff frowned at that idea. The neighbors weren't all that close, but they were close enough. They knew Cliff well from the times he'd been here cleaning out the cabin. They'd all told him it would be a relief that his sisters and their children wouldn't be tearing the place apart anymore. Cliff wasn't sure that gay barbecue bashes and Tibetan peace flags would go over really well in this very conservative part of the state, which then made Cliff wonder when exactly he had started really caring what the neighbors thought about him. Barbecues and flying peace flags from the eaves certainly wouldn't cause any damage or harm. Spreading a little bit of love and peace might not actually be a bad thing, considering the state of the world currently. Davy always could make any place brighter just with his presence. His enthusiasm for the dramatic made him a highly desired performer in the theater. Most people didn't realize that it wasn't drama for him. Davy told him once that he decided when he was 10 years old that he was gay and he didn't care if anyone else approved or what they thought of it. He had refused to be anything but 110% Davy. Maybe the world just needed more people willing to be more than 100% themselves. How could Cliff had not seen it before? Had he become so enamored of the mundane world, of cash sales versus point-of-sale transactions that he'd lost his vision? When had he become blind to the simple beauty of unscripted laughter? When had he really looked into his lover's eyes? Cliff closed his eyes, 2 tears slowly rolling down his cheeks. He should bring Davy up here for his birthday. He should make it his birthday present to Davy. It would be a total surprise. He'd sit Davy down first with an, "I have something to tell you." Then Cliff would tell him about his mother's death. Davy would instantly be all loving attention and sympathy, which Cliff would gently set aside with, "But there's more, except I need to show it to you." Davy would be surprised then. He'd have no idea, though. Cliff would have to come up with a reason for the 10-hour drive. That would be no problem, though. They'd make it a real road trip. Maybe even take 2 days for the drive. Stay somewhere fun about halfway. He remembered hearing about some nudist camp around Decatur. That would certainly be entertaining. They'd close the shop up for a week. Forget about the mundane. they'd bring the magic back. For the both of them. In an instant, the entire vision became absolutely clear in Cliff's mind. And in the next instant, a wave of euphoria, relief, and joy washed over him. He sat, stunned, the slowly cooling engine ticking in front of him. He could absolutely do that. He would absolutely do that. And in that instant, Cliff quantum jumped from one reality to another. He got out of the car feeling at least 2 inches taller than when he'd gotten in that morning. The sun, on its inevitable path to the horizon, cast everything in gold. The air was almost shimmering, and birds were singing their evening chorus in the tall fir trees around the property. It was with new eyes that Cliff surveyed the cabin. Only having Davy here could make it more perfect.